Gaming Bolt presents 15 survival horror video games set in space. The final frontier isn't just filled with unexplored planets and shining stars, at least not according to video games. Some of the best horror games choose the void of space to stage their adventures. Here are 15 games that show off what's so frightening about being stranded among the stars. Please note that this list also consists of unreleased games which are expected to be pretty good when they eventually hit the market. Alien Isolation. In space, no one can hear you scream. This was the tagline for the original Alien movie, and it stands true for the amazing Alien Isolation. What it does better than Alien games before it is that it perfectly captures the primal predatory nature of the xenomorph. It slings through the shadows, dropping from the vents and plunging its tail into the player. You never feel safe when you know that it could be anywhere at any moment. Dead Space. Isaac Clarke's journey through the USG Ishimura was filled with gore, dismemberment, and plenty of jump scares. The sinewy necromorphs were mutated corpses that could leap out of any shadow, and the lack of a quick turn meant that very second counted. The game's story wasn't much to speak of, but it made up for it with stellar pacing and an incredibly tantalizing world. Stasis. The majority of this list is comprised of first-person or third-person experiences, but Stasis stands out. Point-and-click adventure games have made a bit of a comeback, but few games of the genre have ever tried their hand at horror. Stasis perfectly executed this dream, putting players in a beautifully realized world that begs to be explored. Dispatcher. Dispatcher is a first-person horror with RPG elements, and takes place on a spaceship where the crew got into an accident and trapped with alien monsters. The game is full of smart environmental storytelling, compelling backstory, and of course, aliens. Dead Space 2. After the release of the stellar Dead Space, many began to wonder what the sequel could do to move the series forward. It turns out it could do quite a lot. Offering up more varied environments, a better story, and better pacing, it created many classic horror moments. Routine. First-person exploration games have quickly risen in popularity, especially horror titles. When a horror game focuses squarely on environmental exploration, a lot of emphasis is placed on the tension and atmosphere. Routine revels in its atmosphere. The entire game is soaked in it, making every corridor seem deadly and every shadow hostile. Syndrome. Syndrome nails the claustrophobic experience of what it must be like to be stuck in space. You can choose to meet your enemy head-on, but it certainly isn't advised. Rushing headlong into combat is a surefire way to die. Taking its inspiration from classic horror games, it focuses on making the player feel helpless and constantly holding a sense of dread over them. Dead Space 3. While it's arguably the weakest of the Dead Space games, Dead Space 3 still offers up creepy ships to explore, plenty of grotesque monsters to dismember, and a desolate planet to traverse. The game's first quarter, which sees Isaac Clarke weightlessly floating from ship to ship in a massive expansive space, is one of gaming's most nerve-wracking journeys through the void. POLLEN. VR is promising to grant players more immersive experiences, and POLLEN is looking to deliver. It's positioned as a first-person experience, focusing on exploration and a gripping story. The game's stellar realization of a decrepit space station looks like it will capture the feeling of isolation that has always permeated art's depiction of space. Caffeine. Caffeine is unique because it doesn't force players to fight their way through throngs of aliens or space zombies. It creates an incredibly dense atmosphere and combines it with physiological horror elements to make you truly fear for your life and sanity. Martian Gothic Unification. A lot of horror games pit a sole protagonist against impossible odds, but Martian Gothic Unification puts an entire crew of characters on the Red Planet and makes it impossible for them to meet. If they come face to face, they will die. Instead, they have to work together for supplies without ever crossing paths. Solarix. Space is known for causing most sounds to fall on deaf ears, which makes it the perfect setting for a stealth game. Solarix puts players on a desolate space station in the year 2166, and pits them against armed militants and zombified colonists. Nightjar. What happens when you can only rely on your ears to survive the void of space? This is the premise of the Nightjar, a terrifying experiment in sightless horror. Players are guided by the dulcet tones of Benedict Cumberbatch and led through a maze infested with aliens and other extraterrestrial horrors. Echo Night Beyond. When Richard Osmond begins his journey to a moon base to marry his fiancée, he didn't expect the facility to be overrun with space ghosts. These spectral forces haunt the player's entire experience, and the lack of guns means that every encounter is a fight for survival. Doom 3. The Doom series quickly established itself as an atmospheric, bloody romp through the most terrifying environments. Doom 3 had a similar run-and-gun gameplay style that was successful with its predecessors, and featured densely atmospheric and surprisingly expansive environments. Later on, a BFG edition was released which featured better visuals and more horror effects. And if you like what we're doing, go ahead and click that subscribe button. See you soon.